Okay, in section 9.1 we're going to be talking about measurement, specifically lengths. All of chapter 9 is going to be regarding measurement. We'll start with one of the first things that we learned about measuring in elementary school was dealing with lengths. Of course, we use the English system here in the United States, even though we're one of very few countries that use that particular system. We're all very familiar with it because we've been using it since we've been born, basically. Ultimately, we know some of the standard conversions between units in our English system. Of course, 12 inches is 1 foot, 3 feet in a yard, 36 inches in a yard, and also 5,280 feet in a mile. Keep in mind that I assume that these three are well known to all of us, but this one, if you do not know this would be a good time to memorize it. Since you live in America, you should have this memorized as well. What we're going to be doing today is either with the English system or the metric system or both. We're going to be converting from one unit to another. So most of our work today is going to be regarding converting. And what we're going to do is use a method that we call dimensional analysis. We'll look at the definition of that in a minute. But ultimately it's going to rely on the fact that we use these what we call unit fractions. Okay, so unit fractions, the fact that if I put 12 inches over 1 foot, okay, they call it a unit fraction because this is really just equal to 1, because if I divide this by this, they're exactly the same, so therefore we get 1. Anytime we divide something by itself, we get 1. So all of these are considered unit fractions because what's on the top and what's on the bottom is exactly the same. So even though we don't have the same units here, okay, 1 mile and 5,280 feet are exactly the same, therefore we call this a unit fraction. Now, this definition then of dimensional analysis, as I mentioned, ultimately if we want to convert a measurement to a different unit, and notice this doesn't talk about just lengths, this could be for any type of measurement, so we'll be using this throughout from here on out. We're going to multiply by the unit fraction or unit fractions. Okay. The given unit of measurement should appear in the denominator of the unit fraction so that this unit cancels upon multiplication. And the unit measurement that needs to be introduced should appear in the numerator of the fraction so that this will be the retained unit upon multiplication. Now, that sounds rather complicated, but really it's not complicated at all, as we'll see when we put this into practice. Okay? So, what we're going to do then is we're going to start by changing 40 inches into feet. So what we're going to do is write down 40 inches on our paper. So we'll write 40 inches, and then we're going to multiply by the unit fraction. Okay, and here's how I decide what unit fraction I'm going to use. Well, first of all, I don't want inches, I want feet, so that means I want to put inches on the bottom. And notice I didn't put any numbers in there yet, I'm just going to deal with the units only. And I want to bring in feet. Well, if I know a direct relationship between inches and feet, then all I need is just one unit fraction to get this done. Well, in our case, we do know just a relationship. We know that 1 foot is equal to 12 inches. So after I decide what the units are, then I'm going to go ahead and put in the numbers that would make this a unit fraction. Okay. Now, what that does then again is it cancels out the inches and it leaves me with feet. So from here, all I have to do is multiply top, bottom, and if there's anything to divide at the end, I'm going to go ahead and divide those two. And if I divide, in this case, I'm going to get 12 going into 40, going there 3 times with 4 left over. So it would be 3 4/12 or 3 1/3 feet. Okay, so that means that 40 inches corresponds to 3 1/3 feet. Okay. All right, let's see another one here. Let's do 13,200 feet, and we want to change that to miles. So notice once again I wrote down feet and I wrote times fraction. Okay, we're going to do that same thing every time. I want to get rid of feet and I want to bring in miles. And lucky for us, there's a direct conversion between feet and miles. As we said, we know that 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet, and therefore we're going to have 13,200 on top, 5,280 on the bottom, and when we do the math on that, we'll get 13,200 divided by 5,280 gives us 2.5, 2.5, and so ultimately that many feet corresponds to 2.5 miles. Okay. All right. So next, what we're going to look at is length in the metric system, because we need to be able to deal with the metric system in this country as well. The prefixes that we use in the metric system Okay, and keep in mind that this is going to be used in most industrialized countries. Okay, what's nice about the metric system is it's all based on 10, which is a nice number for us to work with. So whether we're dealing with a meter, which is the length unit in the metric system, okay, the prefixes here, if we have deca, hecto, or kilo, those all mean more than a meter. Deci, centi, and milli mean less than a meter. Okay, so ultimately on the next page, specifically with linear measure, okay, when we have our meter, which is going to be our unit measure, 1 meter is going to be what everything is based off of. If I have a decameter, okay, that's equal to 10 meters. This is like a conversion chart ultimately. A hectometer is worth 100 meters, and if we have a kilometer, that equals 1,000 meters. Going the other way, if we have a decimeter, that's only 0.1 of a meter, so it's a tenth of a meter. A centimeter is 100th of a meter, and a millimeter is 1,000th of a meter. In other words, it takes 1,000 millimeters to get to a meter. It takes 100 centimeters to make a meter. It takes 10 decimeters to make a meter. Okay. All right. Now, we're going to be talking about changing within the metric system, but before we do that, I do want to point out in your book on page 505, since we don't work with a metric system very often, there's a nice chart here that gives us kind of an idea of what some metric system units would be, like the width of a pencil lead. Okay, we would say that's quite a bit less than an inch. It's about 2 millimeters in the metric system. Okay, the width of an adult thumb, okay, we would say that's a 0.8 of an inch, or an inch, somewhere in there. Okay, that's approximately 2 centimeters. The height of an adult male, if you're 6 feet tall, you're about 1.8 meters. And this kind of gives you just an idea if you were asked to tell what the length of something is in the metric system, you can kind of compare it to these things that we already know. Okay, so that's page 505. Alright, so going back to changing within the metric system, all we need to do is either multiply or divide by a power of 10, which makes it actually easier than dealing with unit fractions. Okay, so with that said, the general rule here that we're going to lay out is that if we want to change from larger units to small units, okay, we're going to be multiplying by 10. If we want to change from smaller to larger, we're going to divide by 10. And ultimately, metric units for length from largest to smallest, if we write them in a horizontal manner, kilometers, hectometers, decameters, meters, decimeters, centimeters, millimeters. Okay. If we want to go from any one of these to any of the others, we'd multiply by 10. And again, we're going to multiply by 10 for each step to the right. So to get from kilometers to meters, let's say, we'd multiply by 10, 10, 10, and then that would give us an amount of meters. Okay, so ultimately, instead of multiplying by 10, we're going to be really multiplying by 1,000 to get down to meters. Okay, and same thing going the other way. If we want to go from millimeters to something else, we're going to divide by 10 for each of the steps that we take on our way up to kilometers. Okay, so let's take a look at an example. We want to multiply, excuse me, we want to take 504.7 meters, and we want to change that to kilometers. I'm going to show you 2 different ways we can do this. Okay, so first I'm going to go back to the chart that we had. If we want to go from meters, that is, to kilometers, we're going to go 1, 2, 3. It's 3 units to the left. Okay, that means we're going to divide by 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000. So if we divide 504.7 by 1,000, okay, the answer is going to be 0.5047 kilometers. Okay. Now, another way you can do it, if you like the dimensional analysis, there's no reason you can't use it. So if you were to do 504.7 meters, and then you want to bring in meters, or excuse me, to get rid of meters, bring in kilometers, we know that 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. And notice when we set it up this way, we're going to wind up doing the same thing, because we're going to get 504.7 on top, 1,000 on the bottom, and we'll get the same result. So you can use the dimensional analysis method if you'd like to when we're converting in the metric system, just like we did in the English system. Okay. One more example using the metric system. We're going to change 27 meters. We want to change it to centimeters. We could use dimensional analysis, get rid of meters, bring in centimeters. We know there's 100 centimeters per 1 meter, and ultimately that would indicate that we'd multiply by 100. But once again, if we go from meters to centimeters, that's 2 steps. That means 10 times 10, that's 100. So we'd multiply 27 times 100, and we get 2,700 centimeters, and we'd be done. Okay. Now, for us, one of the important things that we need to be able to do as well is convert from English to metric and vice versa. So there are a couple of conversions here that we do not have to have memorized, okay, that help us go from one to the other. And these are ultimately going to be, they can be written as unit fractions for us so that we can use the dimensional analysis to get to what we need to get to. Okay, so again, these are in your notes. You do not have to have these facts memorized. Okay, but let's go ahead and see them in action. Okay. So if we're going to do 125 miles, and we want to get rid of miles, we're going to put those on the bottom. And let's go back to our conversion and see, is there a direct relationship between miles and kilometers? And there certainly is right here. So we can go ahead and put kilometers on top. And it says in our chart that there's 1.6 kilometers per 1 mile. And with that said, we would just go ahead and cross out our miles. And then we have nothing on the bottom besides 1. So in this case, it's just a matter of multiplying 125 times 1.6. And we get 200 kilometers. Okay. Similarly, if we want to change 26,800 millimeters to inches, here's where we have an issue, because on the previous page we don't have a direct relationship between millimeters and inches. We have a direct relationship between inches and centimeters. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that. We're going to change millimeters to centimeters first. So millimeters are now gone. And notice I didn't write any numbers in here yet. Then we're going to get rid of centimeters and bring in inches, because we know a direct relationship between inches and centimeters. So we know that 1 centimeter is 10 millimeters because these are next to each other on the chart that we looked at. And also we know that 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters, and that's from our chart on the previous page. Okay? And keep in mind that whatever we're changing from, we're putting in the bottom and bringing in something new. Bottom, bring in something new. Okay? Ultimately, with these fractions that we have here, we could have 15 of them if need be, okay, until we get rid of the units that we don't want and finally bring in the units that we do want, where we can have a direct relationship. And with that said, if all these cancel out, the only thing left is inches, and so we're good to go. So in our case, we'd have 26,800 on top. If we multiply the tops, the bottoms, 10 times 2.54 would be 25.4. And so if we calculate that, 26,800 divided by 2.54, we wind up with a 10,551.181 inches. And that would be our approximate measure in inches that would correspond with 26,800 millimeters. So in our work for this section, that's exactly what we're going to be doing, is working with our English and metric measurements and working on being able to convert back and forth between any one unit to any given unit.